This is what the internet used to look like.
I don't know how to navigate this situation.
Oh my.
Oh my God.
The internet in the 90s was intimate, unfinished, chaotic.
Everything on here is animated very fast.
I mean, when I close my eyes at night, this is what I'm gonna see.
But whether you love it or hate it, the early web is disappearing, fast.
Can I click on it?
All the links are broken.
I wish the links worked.
This is the story of the race to save the early internet. And it's not just about preserving history. Hidden within the star backgrounds and construction signs are lessons that some people think could make today's internet a better place. People like Olia.
Time neuron, welcome, under construction. Marquee is very important, yeah?
Olia makes art on the internet, and she studies the early web.
Star backgrounds, always, naturally.
We're gonna make a Starry Night background, for sure.
That's us. I'm Megan.
I'm Marcy. This is what we were doing in the 90s. At the same time, in Germany, Olia was teaching web design, and she would show her students websites like these as a joke.
I'm ashamed. Very short period of my life when I was making fun.
Specifically, she was making fun of the amateur personal websites that were such a huge part of the early web.
They were constantly ridiculed by professionals, and it was like a campaign that they stop to make web pages. It's something what you shouldn't do.
One day, in the early 2000s, she realized that these pages were disappearing. So she started a collection.
I was not concerned about the history. I was just thinking, oh, now it will be more difficult for me to make a difference to my students. But then again, quite soon, it became an obsession.
We assume that the things posted online will stay forever, but they don't. Software becomes obsolete, people stop paying for domain names, companies that host websites go out of business or get sold. It actually takes a lot of work and money to archive things on the internet. And if no one does it, things can disappear forever. Olia started doing the work, and she found herself part of a small but growing group of people who preserve our digital history.
One of those people is Dragan, with an A.
I'm the preservation director at Rhizome.
Dragan loves the early web. Today, he works to preserve art and culture on the internet. But in 1999, Dragan was in a band that played computer chip music. This is actually one of his songs. He first met Olia at one of his shows. They started collaborating on projects that were all about the early internet. And then they got married to each other. As for their work, most of their inspiration comes from one place, GeoCities.
In 1999, GeoCities was the third most popular website in the world. It had 38 million pages. That's over 6 times as many as there are in English on Wikipedia today. GeoCities was kind of like an early social media platform, but more personalized.
This dog is like a proto-influencer.
People made websites about their lives. They formed communities around things like Backstreet Boys and anime. And they also reacted to what was happening outside the internet. Together, they called themselves netizens, citizens of the net.
If you have any ideas, I can make this better. Wow. It's very collaborative.
Yahoo bought GeoCities in 1999 at its height. A decade later, they decided to shut it down. The entire website, all its GIFs, all its writing, all its content, was going to be deleted. But before that happened, a collective of digital archivists called the Archive Team stepped in and downloaded the entire GeoCities server.
It was like the fire brigade coming in or something. They captured as much of GeoCities as was possible for them, which resulted in 1 terabyte of data.
1 terabyte. That's about how much a desktop computer can store today, compressed into a single file. Dragan and Olia weren't part of the Archive Team, but what they did with the file was also important. They created a system that posts screenshots from that file to Tumblr. Their blog helped introduce GeoCities to a new, younger audience.
The idea is really to highlight this culture and to post a picture every 20 minutes on Tumblr basically to an audience that maybe has no recollection of a world before the internet.
Their research goes beyond Tumblr. Olia's exhibited art about GeoCities in museums, and Dragan works to preserve websites, both from the early web and from today. They think it's important to preserve the internet because it's constantly evolving. And it doesn't just look different, it feels different.
This is what the internet looks like today. It's plain, white, approachable.
So for example, if you think about an Instagram feed, it looks very gallery-like, very neutral.
Clean and friendly as paper.
I hate Instagram. No, I don't hate Instagram.
The internet is no longer just for netizens. Half of the world is now online, a lot of the time. It makes sense that it's seamless, easy to use. But that ease comes at a cost.
Isn't it better now that anyone can go on Squarespace and make a website now? Isn't that?
Yeah, they just all look the same. That's like a bit sad.
Platforms limit what you can post. And unless you're a developer, you can't change how most websites look.
You have to be professional. You have to learn a lot.
Which is completely different from how the early web operated.
Everything was very hands-on.
People were not just posting something, they were with their web pages, they were creating the medium, creating the World Wide Web.
In other words, people built a sense of ownership into the early web.
The feeling of community that you would have was very, very tight.
And all those early web cliches actually helped create that community. Take GIFs. On the early web, a lot of them were transparent. Why? Olia says it's because they were made to be shared on other people's pages. She's even made a few of her own. Under construction signs showed that behind an unfinished website, a person was there, working on it. And people decorated their sites with welcome signs, guest books, and mail me buttons so that their pages would feel like homes. Because cyberspace used to be a destination in itself.
In the earlier times, it was about, here, you are on the internet, and all of these lamps are glowing, and these globes are spinning, and the browser would basically tell you, you are on the internet, you made it, you connected all the cables correctly, you installed all the tools.
So it's not just the aesthetic that Dragan and Olia miss. They also miss the mindset.
What is lost when some of those web pages disappear forever?
They lost this idea that you are the maker of the World Wide Web.
I mean, it looks silly with the backgrounds and the flash animation and the weird colors, but you do see personality there that is missing from the modern internet.
The early web aesthetic is having a bit of a comeback today. Here's the official website for Captain Marvel. Here's BoJack Horseman's. These websites look like the early web, but the actual early web is almost gone. And communities formed after GeoCities are also at risk of disappearing. In early 2019, MySpace announced that they lost over 10 years of people's music, pictures, and messages. And Flash, which made much of the early web run, will be shut down in 2020. So what happened to GeoCities wasn't unique. It was just one of the first to go. Dragan doesn't want to see that happen again, even if he thinks most websites today look the same. So he works on a project called Web Recorder that lets anyone preserve any website. Because we can't speak for what future users will want to remember.
I kind of want to keep on scrolling.
This is amazing.
If there's anything to be learned from the rise and fall of GeoCities, it's that things on the internet can disappear, just like that. But they can also be resurrected by people.
Which means users can also be creators.
You're inspired. I have a feeling that you will now go and make a web page.
If you liked this video, you'll probably like being a Quartz member. You'll get access to exclusive videos and a daily education on the forces rewriting the global economy. Sign up here for a free trial.